I know, but I'd be sitting here telling this story. Part of me feels ashamed, part of me still hurts. But mostly, I'm telling it because if I don't, I might forget how low I once was and how hard I fought to pull myself out. There's no magic twist in this story, no sudden fairy tale ending. It's just me, an ordinary girl who loved the wrong person at the wrong time and had to figure out how to survive when everything fell apart. This isn't a story about revenge. It's not a story about winning. It's a story about surviving, about starting over from nothing. Just me, my broken heart, and the stubborn hope that somehow I could still build something better. If you're ready, come walk with me through it. From the sweet beginning to the darkest nights, and maybe to the first fragile steps of healing. This is my story. Maybe, in some way, it'll feel like yours too. Jidon Mort, the beginning, meeting Liam. I never thought a speeding ticket would change my life. But here we are. It was 4 years ago. A stupid Saturday morning when I showed up at the local wildlife rehabilitation center, half asleep and totally annoyed that I had to do community service instead of sleeping in. That is where I met Liam. He was already there, leaning against the wall, wearing this old hoodie and scuffed sneakers. Not exactly a meet cute straight out of a movie. We were both criminals in the eyes of the county. Well, petty criminals, at least. I was there for speeding. He never really said what he did, just laughed and said it was a misunderstanding. Classic. We got assigned to the overnight bottle feeding shift. You know, the one nobody else wanted. 3 a.m. Both of us half dead, trying to feed this tiny, orphaned baby fox that refused to cooperate. I was getting frustrated, ready to give up and call the supervisor, when Liam started humming this soft, weird little tune. And like magic, the fox calmed down, stopped squirming, and latched onto the bottle. I just stared at him like, "Who the hell are you?" He shrugged and said his grandma taught him that song, said something about vibrations being soothing. Honestly, it sounded like total nonsense, but hey, it worked. After the shift, we sat outside watching the sunrise. He told me random animal facts, like how foxes can hear a watch ticking from 40 yards away. I told him he was full of it. He pulled up a YouTube video to prove it. I laughed harder than I had in months. We exchanged numbers before we left. He texted me later that day a video of a baby panda sneezing so hard it scared its mom, said it was required viewing. It was silly, random, easy. I did not know it then, but that morning would be the start of 4 of the most complicated years of my life. Maybe if I had just ignored that first text, maybe if I had skipped community service altogether, but I didn't. And that is where everything began. I thought the hardest part was over. But looking back, it was only the beginning. And the cracks I tried to ignore were about to split wide open. At first, it was little things. His mom would make these small comments, casual enough to sound harmless, sharp enough to leave a mark. She would say things like, "Oh, you wore your hair like that today. Brave." Or, Some people just are not cut out for real careers. She would laugh it off like she was joking, but it never felt like a joke. Liam would defend her. Of course he would. He would say, "She means well. You know how she is." And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that love meant overlooking the people we came from, even when they made you feel small. The first few times, I brushed it off, smiled, nodded, told myself not to be sensitive, but little by little, it wore me down. A slow erosion, not enough to notice at first, but enough that one day I realized. I laughed a little quieter, smiled a little less, bit my tongue a little more. We still had good days, lazy Sundays wrapped in blankets, breakfasts at that tiny diner down the street. He still made me laugh until I snorted, still kissed my forehead like I was the most precious thing in the world. And maybe that is why I stayed, because the good parts were good enough to make me question the bad ones. I kept thinking, if I just tried a little harder, if I picked the right words, smiled the right way, laughed at the right jokes, maybe his mom would like me. Maybe Liam would not have to choose between us. Maybe I would not always feel like an outsider standing at the edge of my own life. Looking back now, it is almost funny how much time I spent trying to win over someone who had already decided I was not good enough. How hard I fought for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. But back then, I still believed that love, real love, could fix everything. I wish someone had told me sooner. Sometimes, love is just not enough. I kept thinking, if I just loved harder, if I just held on tighter, maybe things would get better. But some storms, no matter how tightly you bolt the windows, still find a way inside. I did not know it yet, but the real breaking point was already on its way. It started with the little things. I was tired all the time, snapping at people over nothing. Food smelled weird. Coffee made me gag. At first, I blamed stress, deadlines piling up, bills stacking higher than I liked to admit, life stuff, the usual. It never crossed my mind that it could be something more. Until my best friend, Jess, gave me that look. You know the one. The mix of concern and mischief that means she is about to say something you do not want to hear. "You should take a test," she said, casual, like it was no big deal. I laughed it off. But later that night, standing in the fluorescent horror of a gas station bathroom, I watched the word pregnant pop up on a tiny plastic screen. No faint line, no room for doubt. I sat there, staring, trying to remember how to breathe. It felt impossible, not because it was some nightmare, but because, deep down, I had always pictured this moment being different. I had imagined smiling, calling Liam right away, crying happy tears together. Instead, I shoved the test into my jacket pocket and drove home in silence. One hand gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. For 2 days, I kept it to myself, carrying the secret like a fragile glass ball, afraid that if I said it out loud, it would shatter everything. I planned it carefully. Saturday morning, I would cook his favorite breakfast, those banana pancakes he loved. Make it feel normal, safe. And then, when the timing felt right, I would tell him. I rehearsed it in my head 100 times, practiced smiling like it was good news, because it was, right? It was supposed to be. I held on to that hope, clutched it tight with both hands, because if I let myself think about anything else, about all the little cracks I had been ignoring, I knew I might lose my nerve, and I needed to believe, just for a little longer, that everything was still okay. Sometimes I think about how it all started, that first night with Liam, the way everything felt easy, like it was meant to be. And then how slowly the cracks began to show. Tiny at first, almost invisible if you were not looking too hard. But trust me, those cracks, they were just the beginning. If you think it hurt to watch something good start to slip away, just wait until you see what came next. Saturday morning came, and I tried to pretend it was just like any other morning. I got up early, made his favorite banana pancakes, even made fresh coffee. Even though the smell still made my stomach turn, I set the table perfectly. 2 plates, 2 mugs, a little jar of maple syrup in the center, like it was some kind of peace offering. I wanted everything to feel normal, calm, safe. Liam wandered out of the bedroom in his old sweatpants, rubbing his eyes, smiling sleepily at me. For a second, I almost believed we were still okay, that the cracks were just in my head, that the worst thing I had to worry about was whether the pancakes were a little too burnt. Then the door opened, and there she was, his mother, uninvited, letting herself in with the spare key she had insisted on keeping. Another crack I had ignored for too long. She breezed in like she owned the place, talking about needing coffee, needing to chat. Liam just shrugged and set another plate on the table like this was normal, like her showing up unannounced during a moment that was supposed to change our lives was no big deal. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the syrup, but I smiled. I smiled because that was what I always did. Pretended, pushed it down, made it easier for everyone else. We sat, we ate, or at least they did. I barely touched my food, kept running through the speech I had rehearsed 100 times in my head, waiting for the right moment. There never was a right moment. So finally, I just pulled the test out of my pocket, placed it on the table, and said, "I have something to tell you." Liam looked at it, then at me. His face did not change, not surprise, not joy. Just this look of tired annoyance, like I had spilled coffee on his shirt. He leaned back, took a bite of pancake, and said, "Abortions are quick." And his mother, she did not even blink. She just sipped her coffee, smiled that cold little smile of hers, and said, "Finally, he sees you for what you really are." I sat there, frozen, like the air had been sucked out of the room. 4 years, 4 years of trying, loving, believing, and this was all I was worth to them. Without a word, I stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. No bag, no jacket, no plan, just me, and whatever pieces of myself I could still carry. I wish I could tell you that walking out was the hardest part, that once I left, things somehow got easier. But the truth is, sometimes the real battle starts after you finally find the strength to leave. Stay with me, because what came next nearly broke me. I walked. At first, I had no idea where I was going. My feet just moved on their own, one step after another, like they knew I could not stand still or I would break. The morning air was cold, too cold for the thin hoodie I had grabbed off the chair. I had my phone and my wallet shoved in my pocket, but nothing else. No overnight bag, no plan, no idea what I was supposed to do now. I ended up at a little coffee shop a few blocks away. It was the kind of place we used to walk past on the weekends, the kind of place I never thought much about. Until now. I bought the cheapest drink on the menu, a small chai latte, and I sat there for hours. The barista kept giving me these little worried glances. Maybe it was the way I clutched my cup with both hands. Maybe it was the way I stared out the window without blinking. Or maybe it was just obvious I did not belong there. I did not cry, not at first. I just felt empty, like all the parts of me that used to be strong had been hollowed out, scraped clean. Eventually, I called Jess, the only friend who still talked to me. She did not ask a lot of questions, just told me to come over. Her apartment was small, smelled like cigarettes and cat food, but it was warm, and there was a blanket on the floor with my name on it. I crashed there that night, and the next, and the next, washing my face in her tiny bathroom, rinsing my underwear in the sink, trying not to be in the way, trying not to take up too much space. I got a job washing dishes at a diner downtown, under the table pay, long hours, the kind of work nobody else wanted, but it was something, a way to keep my hands busy, a way to pretend I still had some control. My body was already changing. Morning sickness hitting me at the worst times, exhaustion so deep it felt like I was made of lead. There were nights when I wanted to call Liam, to scream at him, to beg him, to tell him he had broken something inside me I was not sure would ever heal. But I never did. I blocked his number after the 10th missed call, blocked his friends too. I had nothing left to say. Jess tried. She really did. But I could feel her patience thinning. I was an uninvited guest in her messy little life, a constant reminder of all the things that could go wrong. I started disappearing for longer and longer stretches, spending hours at the diner even when I was not scheduled, walking the streets, riding the bus just to kill time, anything to avoid being in the way. One night, after a particularly rough shift, I came back to her place and found Liam sitting on her couch. I did not say a word. I just turned around and ran. I ran until my chest burned, until my feet blistered inside my sneakers. I ended up at a 24-hour laundromat, sitting on a cracked plastic chair, watching strangers fold their clean clothes, living their normal lives, while mine felt like it was unraveling thread by thread. That was the night I realized something. I could not keep living like this, floating from couch to couch, shift to the shift, panic attack to the panic attack. I needed something more, something solid, something safe, not just for me anymore, but for the tiny life growing inside me. And somehow, some way, I was going to find it. I thought hitting rock bottom would feel like a clean break, like once you crashed, you could start climbing back up. But what no one tells you is sometimes rock bottom is not a floor, it is a tunnel. And sometimes the only way out is to keep walking through the darkness. Stay with me, because the hardest parts were still waiting. The thing about sleeping on someone else's floor is that no matter how careful you are, you still feel like a burden. I tried so hard to be invisible at Jess's place, a shadow tucked into a corner. I would sneak into the bathroom when she was not home, eat ramen noodles straight out of the pot to save dishes, wash my socks in the sink and hang them by the heater, pretend like maybe, somehow, I was not taking up too much space. But space is not just physical, it is emotional too. And I could feel it, the walls closing in. The way Jess sighed a little louder every time she stepped over my pile of thrift store clothes. The way she stopped asking how my day was. Stopped waiting up when I came back from the diner. I could not blame her. Not really. I was a walking reminder of everything she was trying to escape. Failure, exhaustion, desperation. Some nights, after a late shift, I would stay out until the buses stopped running, just riding back and forth, listening to the crackle of the old speakers announcing stops, feeling like a ghost in my own life. I was losing pieces of myself, one compromise at a time. First my apartment, then my privacy, then my pride. I stopped calling my mom, stopped checking social media, stopped dreaming about anything more than making it through another shift without throwing up or passing out. And Liam, he kept trying to reach me. Blocked numbers, random messages from mutual friends, flowers left at the diner with my name scrawled across cheap cards. I never even opened the notes, just watched Vicky toss them straight into the trash without blinking. It should have made me feel powerful, untouchable, but mostly it just made me tired. One morning, after another sleepless night on the thin carpet, Jess sat across from me with a cup of instant coffee in her hand. She looked at me the way someone looks at a stray dog they do not know how to help. She said, gently but firmly, "You need a plan." She was right. As much as it hurt to admit, I could not stay there forever, not when I was getting bigger every week, not when the reality of becoming a mom was crashing down around me faster than I could catch my breath. That night, I pulled out my cracked phone, started Googling shelters, programs, anything. It was humiliating, typing the words "pregnant homeless help" into a search bar, filling out forms that asked if I had anywhere safe to sleep, checking boxes that screamed failure louder than I ever could. But there it was, a women's shelter across town, one that had a specific program for pregnant women, a 6-week maximum stay, strict rules, No visitors, but safe. I called the next morning, my voice shaking so badly the intake worker had to ask me to repeat my name twice. They had a spot opening in 3 days. 3 days, 72 hours. Seemed like a lifetime when you were already hanging by a thread. But it was a chance, maybe the last one I had. I hung up the phone, looked around Jess's cramped apartment, the cats winding around my ankles, the stale cigarette smell clinging to the curtains. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to hope, not happiness, not relief, just a flicker, small, shaky, stubborn. But sometimes a flicker is enough. I wanted to believe that finding a shelter meant the worst was finally behind me, that maybe, just maybe, I had survived the storm. But sometimes survival is only the beginning. Stay with me, because getting through the door was only the first battle. 3 days, 72 hours of waiting, packing, panicking. When the day finally came, Jess drove me across town in her beat-up Honda. Neither of us talked much. I think we both knew this was goodbye. At least, the version of goodbye where you pretend you will see each other soon, even when you both know you won't. The shelter was an old brick house on a quiet street. From the outside, it almost looked normal. But once you stepped inside, the rules were everywhere. Sign-in sheets, curfews, no visitors, mandatory meetings. The woman at the front desk introduced herself as Evelyn, mid-50s maybe, gray hair pulled into a messy bun, no-nonsense eyes. She handed me a folder full of papers, a list of chores, a schedule for counseling sessions. Her voice was kind, but firm, no promises, no sugarcoating. My room was not really a room. It was a partitioned corner of the upstairs, just big enough for a narrow bed, a chipped dresser, and a window that faced a brick wall. There was a communal bathroom down the hall, 4 women sharing one shower, one sink. Privacy was a luxury I could no longer afford. The first night, I lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the sounds of other lives leaking through the thin walls, soft crying, a baby fussing, someone's TV too loud. I pulled the scratchy blanket up to my chin and tried to convince myself I was safe. Safe, but not home. The next morning, Evelyn found me poking at a bowl of soggy cereal in the kitchen. She sat across from me, pushed a few more papers my way. Resources, clinics, free pregnancy classes, lists of affordable housing programs. You have 6 weeks here, she said. Make them count. 6 weeks, 42 days. A ticking clock I could hear louder than my own heartbeat. I threw myself into the schedule, attended every class, every appointment, took every handout they offered, even when the words blurred together in my tired brain. I got a part-time job at a grocery store, stocking shelves at dawn, woke up at 4 a.m., walked 20 minutes because I could not afford the bus, spent my shifts moving heavy boxes, pretending my back was not already screaming. The exhaustion was brutal. The nausea lessened, but the hunger replaced it. I was always tired, always hungry, always a little bit scared. I started showing a little, just a small curve under my thrift store hoodie, enough that people started glancing at my belly instead of my face. Sometimes, during breaks, I would sit outside the store on a broken bench, watch families pile groceries into SUVs, moms yelling at toddlers, dads juggling shopping bags, normal chaos. The kind of chaos I used to think I was too young to understand. Now, it felt like a world I was no longer part of, a world I was trying desperately to rejoin, even if the door had slammed shut behind me. Liam still tried to reach out, blocked numbers, missed calls, voicemails I deleted without listening. He even showed up at the store once. I hid in the back room until my manager threatened to call security. I wanted to believe I was getting stronger, that every day I survived made me braver, tougher. But the truth was, most days, survival felt like barely hanging on by my fingernails, and the clock kept ticking. 6 weeks, 42 days, 41, 40, 39. Time slipping through my fingers faster than I could catch it. And I knew if I did not find a way out, I would be right back where I started, maybe worse. I thought finding a bed, even one behind a thin curtain, would be enough to quiet the fear. But fear does not go away just because you close your eyes. It waits. It grows. It whispers about everything you are running out of. Time, money, hope. Stay with me, because the countdown had only just begun. The days inside the shelter blurred together. Wake up, breakfast, meetings, shifts at the grocery store, back to bed, over and over, like a scratched record stuck in the same groove. I kept my head down, followed every rule, did every chore, showed up for every class. I told myself that if I played by all the rules, maybe life would finally cut me a break. Some days, it almost felt normal. Folding donated baby clothes during a parenting class, learning how to swaddle a stuffed bear with a worn blanket, listening to the quiet hum of other women breathing in the dark. Other days, it felt like I was drowning in silence, the weight of everything I had lost pressing down on my chest until it was hard to breathe. But there was no time for feeling sorry. The 6-week clock kept ticking louder with every sunset. I scraped together every dollar I could from my grocery store job, eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner, wearing the same pair of jeans until they nearly fell apart, saving every coin like it was a piece of my future. My body was changing faster now, my belly rounding out, my back aching from long hours on my feet. People started offering me their place in line at the store, started smiling at me in that sad, pitying way people smile when they see someone who looks like they are losing. I hated that smile. There were small wins, too. Tiny, invisible battles no one else could see. Like making it through a full shift without crying in the walk-in cooler. Like fixing the broken zipper on my jacket with a safety pin. Like learning the bus schedule so well I could time my transfers with 5 minutes to spare. Little things, stupid things maybe, but they kept me moving. Vicky, My old boss at the diner started saving leftovers for me again. A Tupperware of soup left behind the counter. A bag of rolls slipped into my hand with a wink. She never said much, just handed it over like it was nothing. Like I was not a charity case, just someone she still believed in. Those small kindnesses mattered more than I could ever explain. I tried applying for other jobs, better ones that paid enough for me to dream about a tiny apartment somewhere far away from all the memories. But everywhere I went, the answer was the same: too pregnant, too temporary, too much risk. I started looking into government assistance programs, WIC, Medicaid, housing lotteries. I spent hours filling out forms, standing in endless lines, talking to caseworkers who barely looked up from their computers. Some nights, I would sit on the shelter bed, my hands resting on my growing belly, and whisper promises into the dark. I told her we would figure it out, that we would have more than a borrowed bed and a ticking clock, that we would have a home someday. I wanted to believe it, needed to believe it, but every day that passed, every no, every closed door, chipped away at that belief, little by little. Still, I kept going, because what choice did I have? I was not just surviving for myself anymore. I was surviving for both of us, and giving up was no longer an option. I wanted to believe that every small step forward meant the worst was behind me, that surviving meant I was winning. But the truth is, some storms circle back when you least expect it. Stay with me, because the past was not finished with me yet. It started with a voicemail, just a simple buzz on my phone during a lunch break at the grocery store. I almost did not check it. Most of the time, I deleted them without listening, but something made me tap play this time. It was Liam's voice, cracked, raw, saying he had been looking for me, saying he was sorry, saying he was different now. I sat there on the curb behind the store, the winter air biting at my face, listening to him tell me he had started therapy, that he finally realized how much his mother had poisoned everything between us, that he missed me, that he missed what we had. I should have deleted it right there. I should have thrown my phone into the nearest sewer and walked away. But I didn't. I told myself I was just curious, that I just needed to hear how far he had fallen, how broken he sounded without me. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, especially when you are lonely, exhausted, scared. The next day, flowers showed up at the shelter, cheap grocery store roses wrapped in cellophane. No note. But I knew. The staff threw them out before I even touched them. No visitors allowed. No deliveries either. Strict rules, strict lines. And yet, somehow, just seeing them sitting there made my chest ache in ways I thought I had locked away for good. It got worse from there. Random sightings. Liam parked across the street from the grocery store. Liam standing outside the bus stop, pretending not to see me. He never approached, never crossed the line, but he was always there, hovering at the edge of my world, like a shadow I could not shake. Part of me wanted to scream at him, tell him he did not get to miss me now, Not after everything. Another part of me, the stupid, broken part, wanted to believe him, wanted to believe people could change. But then I would remember that morning in the kitchen, the look in his eyes when he said those words, like I was a stain he needed to scrub away. Some things you do not come back from. One night, after an extra long shift at the store, I found him waiting by the shelter gate. He looked terrible, thinner, darker circles under his eyes, like grief had hollowed him out. He called my name, soft, almost afraid. I froze, my heart racing so loud I could barely hear anything else. For a second, a tiny, stupid second, I thought about walking over to him, but then I felt the small flutter of movement inside me, my baby kicking against my ribs, a reminder, sharp and undeniable, of who I was fighting for now. I shook my head, turned around, and walked back inside without a word. From the window upstairs, I watched him sink down onto the curb, his head in his hands. I watched until he finally stood up, until he finally disappeared into the night. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel strong. I just felt tired, tired of fighting battles I never should have had to fight in the first place. Tired of ghosts who refused to stay buried, obeying. Tired of wanting more from people who had nothing left to give. But somewhere deep inside, buried under all the exhaustion and fear, there was a spark, a tiny, stubborn spark, sidewalk, and it whispered, "You are almost free." Almost walking away should have felt like winning, like closing the door for good. But the truth is, some endings do not feel clean. Some endings are just the start of something you never saw coming. Stay with me, because the next door changed everything. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of gray, unremarkable day where you do not expect anything good to happen. I was sitting at the shelter's kitchen table, filling out yet another stack of paperwork, applications for housing programs, food assistance, childcare wait lists, the same questions over and over. Do you have stable housing? Do you have reliable income? Do you have hope left? Okay, they did not actually ask that last one, but they might as well have. Evelyn found me there, hunched over the chipped table, my hands cramping from writing. She pulled out the chair across from me, set a single sheet of paper between us. "There is a spot open," she said. "Transitional housing, 6 months, subsidized rent, support services." I blinked at her, not trusting my ears, not trusting anything anymore. "Are you saying—" I started, but my voice cracked before I could finish. Evelyn just nodded, matter of fact, like she had not just dropped a life raft into a drowning person's lap. The catch, because there is always a catch. The apartment was across town, tiny, barely more than a studio, shared laundry, a neighborhood that was not great. But it was mine, my own door, my own key. I signed the paperwork with a hand that would not stop shaking. The next 3 days were a blur, packing what little I had into 2 trash bags, saying quiet goodbyes to the women who had become accidental witnesses to my breakdown, trying not to cry when Evelyn handed me a battered welcome kit, a roll of toilet paper, a bar of soap, a plastic cup. It was not much, but it was a beginning. Moving day felt like stepping off a cliff. Jess could not come. She had started avoiding my calls. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was relief. So it was just me, a cab driver who did not ask questions, and the weight of everything I had survived to get here. The building was old, paint peeling in places. The elevator shuddered with every floor it climbed. But when I opened the door to Unit 3B, there it was. My place, a tiny kitchen tucked into the corner, a sagging mattress on the floor, a single window with a cracked pane, and silence, glorious, terrifying silence. I dropped my bags, stood in the center of the room, and cried. Not the broken sobs of before, not the helpless weeping of someone lost. This was different. This was the sound of a girl who had been buried under the weight of everyone else's expectations, finally breathing on her own again. I cleaned for hours, scrubbed the grime from the counters, taped the window against the draft, arranged my 3 shirts and 2 pairs of jeans in the tiny closet like they were treasures. That night, I lay on the mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, and for the first time in months, I did not feel like the ground was about to fall out from under me. It was not perfect, it was not forever, but it was a start, and sometimes a start is enough. I had a key in my hand and a roof over my head. For the first time in months, I could breathe without fear. But starting over is not as easy as turning a lock. Stay with me, because survival was only the first step. Building a life, that was a whole different battle. The first night in my new apartment, I slept like the dead. No crying, no tossing and turning, just pure, exhausted silence. Maybe it was the safety of having a door that locked. Maybe it was the kind of tired that seeps into your bones after months of running. Maybe it was hope, curling up quietly at the edge of the mattress, like it was finally allowed to rest too. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was streaming through the cracked window. I lay there for a long time, just listening to the hum of the city outside. People living their lives, buses hissing, someone yelling about coffee 2 blocks down. Normal chaos. It felt like a miracle. I made a list that morning because that is what you do when your life has fallen apart. You make lists. You make plans. You convince yourself that if you write enough things down, you can somehow stitch everything back together. Top of the list, find a better job. The grocery store shifts were not going to cut it once the baby arrived. I needed something steadier, something that paid more than just bus fare and peanut butter sandwiches. So I dusted off my old laptop, taped the charger together with electrical tape, and started applying. Cafes, retail shops, cleaning services, anything. Most places took one look at me, 7 months pregnant, and said they would call. They never called. Some days, it felt like pushing a boulder up a hill that just kept getting steeper. But I kept showing up, because showing up was the only thing I knew how to do. Meanwhile, I started fixing up the apartment. Little things, cleaning the windows, scrubbing the floor, making a tiny pile of things for the baby in the corner of the room. A donated crib someone from the shelter helped me find. A bag of second-hand baby clothes that still smelled faintly of detergent and hope. It was not much, but it was ours. At night, I would sit on the mattress, one hand resting on my growing belly, and tell her stories. Stories about how strong she already was, about how we were going to make it, even if it did not look like the fairy tales. Some nights, I believed it. Other nights, the fear crept in. What if I was not enough? What if I was just building a house of cards that would collapse the second she needed me most? But then she would kick, sharp and determined, and it would ground me again. Life was not perfect, not even close. I still counted every dollar, still worried about how I would afford formula or diapers or a crib mattress that did not sag in the middle. I still woke up some nights, gasping from dreams of old battles I thought I had already fought. But for the first time in a long time, the future did not feel like a wall I would crash into. It felt like a road, a rough, winding road, sure, but a road I could walk, one shaky step at a time. And every day, every tiny, stubborn step forward, I was getting closer, closer to the life I had been fighting for, closer to the day I would finally get to meet the person who made every terrifying choice worth it. And I promised her we were almost there. Almost. If you are still here, thank you for staying through the storms with me. There are more stories waiting just beyond this moment, and maybe the best parts are still ahead. It started with a cramp, nothing dramatic, nothing like the movies, just a slow, low ache that wrapped around my back and refused to let go. At first, I thought maybe I had just overdone it. Scrubbing the floor, reorganizing the tiny pile of baby clothes again, trying to make this one-room apartment feel ready. Like somehow, if I folded the onesies neatly enough, the fear would stay away. But the ache kept coming and going and coming back stronger. By midnight, I knew I was alone. No car, no plan, no person to call. For a few minutes, maybe longer, I sat on the edge of the mattress, just breathing in, out, counting the seconds between the tightening in my belly, wishing, praying that maybe it would just stop. It didn't. I grabbed my bag, the one I had packed weeks ago, just in case, waddled out into the hallway, down the stairs, out into the cold night. There were no cabs in sight, no helpful strangers magically appearing, just me under a flickering streetlight, clutching my belly, trying not to panic. I finally called for a rideshare. The app said 7 minutes, longest 7 minutes of my life. The driver barely looked at me when I climbed into the back seat, just nodded when I mumbled, "Hospital, fast, please." I gripped the seatbelt with one hand, my phone with the other, and tried not to cry every time a contraction hit. When we pulled up to the ER, I nearly collapsed onto the sidewalk. A nurse rushed over with a wheelchair, asked me questions I barely heard. My name, my due date, any complications. I think I answered. Maybe I just nodded. Everything was blurring at the edges. They wheeled me into a room, hooked me up to monitors, told me I was progressing fast, told me the baby would be here soon. Soon. Such a small word for something that was about to split my entire world open. Labor was a different kind of pain. Not sharp like heartbreak, not dull like grief. Something older, deeper, like my body had cracked open and was trying to push the universe through. I screamed, I cried, I begged for it to stop. And then, after what felt like years, I heard it. The first cry, small, fierce, angry at being dragged into this bright, noisy, beautiful world. They placed her on my chest, and everything else faded. The fear, the loneliness, the broken pieces of who I had been before, all of it slipped away the moment I looked into her tiny, scrunched up face. She was perfect, not perfect like the world meant it, not perfect like untouched or unscarred, perfect like a battle-worn flag still flying, perfect like a song sung off key, but with every ounce of your heart. She was mine. I named her Lily, because even in the worst places, even in the darkest corners, lilies find a way to bloom. I whispered promises into her tiny ear, promises that terrified me, promises I had no idea how I would keep. But I meant every word. I would figure it out. One bottle, one night, one broken miracle at a time. We had survived the storm. Now, it was time to build something new. Together. The first night with Lily was nothing like I expected. I thought there would be a flood of joy, a magical glow around us, like the movies. Instead, there was fear, sharp and bright, sitting heavy on my chest. Every tiny noise she made, every shift of her fragile body against mine, set my heart racing. Was she breathing? Was she too cold? Too hot? Was I already failing her? Before we even left the hospital, I barely slept, laying there in the too bright hospital room, watching the rise and fall of her chest with the desperation of someone guarding a flickering flame. By morning, I was wrecked, exhausted, sore, terrified. But when the nurse wheeled in a tiny breakfast tray and Lily opened her mouth in a sleepy yawn, I felt something shift. This was it. This was motherhood. Not the perfect pictures in baby books, not the polished posts on social media, just me and her, stumbling through the unknown together. When we were discharged, they handed me a packet of papers, a tiny hat for her head, and a list of appointments to schedule. No parade, no guidebook, just good luck and a door swinging closed behind me. I strapped Lily into the second-hand car seat with trembling hands, called a cab, rode home in silence, listening to the city buzz around us while she slept without a care in the world. Walking up the 3 flights of stairs to our apartment felt like climbing a mountain, but we made it. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and just like that, we were home. The first few days blurred together, feedings every 2 hours, diaper changes that felt like bomb disposal missions, laundry piles that grew faster than I could keep up. There were moments I sat on the mattress with my head in my hands, wondering how anyone ever survived this. There were moments I laughed so hard I scared Lily, over nothing, over the absurdity of trying to heat at a bottle with a hairdryer when the power went out, over singing lullabies off key until she hiccuped herself to sleep. There were moments I cried because I was too tired to eat, because formula was more expensive than I thought, because the world outside our cracked window felt too big, too dangerous. But through it all, Lily was there, tiny, demanding, fierce. Every squawk, every tiny fist waving in the air reminded me why I kept fighting. I was not just surviving for me anymore. I was building a world for her, one where she would never have to wonder if she was loved, one where her worth would never be measured by someone else's approval. It was messy. It was hard. It was real. And for the first time in a long, long time, it was enough. We had come so far, through storms, through silence, through sleepless nights, and now the hardest parts were behind us. Stay with me, because every journey deserves to be finished, with all the love that carried it here. Time moved differently after Lily was born. Some days felt endless. Others disappeared before I could even catch my breath. She grew so fast. One minute, she was a tiny bundle, barely heavier than a loaf of bread. The next, she was reaching for things, babbling at the ceiling, laughing at shadows on the wall. Our little apartment, the one that once felt too small for all my fears, became a world big enough for dreams again. It was not glamorous. There were still bills I could barely cover, nights when I worried about everything, from diapers to doctor visits, but it was ours. We made a life out of secondhand cribs and chipped coffee mugs, out of walks to the park when the weather was kind, out of lullabies sung off-key while washing dishes, and somewhere along the way, without me even noticing, the fear got quieter. It never disappeared, not really, but it stopped screaming in my ear, stopped coloring every decision with panic. Instead, it became a background hum, a reminder that we had survived worse, that whatever came next, we could face it too. Jess reached out again, a text first, then a coffee date. No big apologies, no dramatic reunions. Just two tired women sitting across from each other, sharing pictures of their messy lives, laughing about how young and stupid we had been. It was enough. Even Liam stayed away, mostly. There were still the occasional messages, a missed call here, a birthday card dropped into the mailbox, but he never pushed. Maybe he finally understood. Or maybe I had just gotten strong enough not to be pulled back. When Lily took her first steps, it was not at a big family gathering, not with a cheering crowd. It was in the middle of our tiny kitchen. While I was stirring pasta on the stove, she just let go of the table, took 3 wobbly steps toward me, and laughed like the world had just been invented. I dropped the spoon, scooped her up, and cried into her hair while the pasta boiled over. It was not a big moment to anyone else, but to me, it was everything. Proof that we were still moving forward, still learning, still standing, one messy, beautiful step at a time. Life was not perfect. It was not easy, but it was real. And for the first time in so long, that was enough, more than enough. I used to think survival was the end of the story, that if we could just survive, it would be enough. But life had bigger plans for us. The days after Lily's first steps blurred into months, months into years, each one filled with tiny moments that stitched themselves into something extraordinary. I finished my degree, one late night study session at a time, one exhausted exam with a toddler asleep on my lap. I found a job, not just any job, a career, working with families who had once been where we were, helping them find housing, support, hope. Every form I filled, every hand I held, felt like a promise I was finally keeping. Not just to them, but to the girl I used to be. The girl sitting on a shelter floor, clutching a dream too fragile to name out loud. We moved again, to a real house this time, a little white place with a red door and a garden out back where Lily planted her first flowers. She would run barefoot through the grass, laughing with a freedom I had fought so hard to give her. Our fridge was always a little too full now, our nights filled with bedtime stories and whispered plans for tomorrow. Not survival anymore. Living, thriving, loving without fear. I built friendships too, real ones, the kind that show up with casseroles when you are sick, the kind that watch your kid when you have a late meeting, the kind that remind you again and again that you are not alone. Even my parents came around, slowly, awkwardly, but genuinely. They loved Lily fiercely, and in their way, they learned to love the woman I had become. Not the perfect daughter they once wanted, but the strong, stubborn, radiant mother who had rebuilt a life from ashes. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I sit by the window, watch Lily's chest rise and fall, and think about everything we have survived, everything we have built. I am not the same girl who walked out with nothing but a broken heart and a trembling hand. I am something more, stronger, wiser, happier than I ever thought I deserved to be. We did not just survive. We became a family. We became a home. We became proof that sometimes the hardest roads lead to the most beautiful destinations. And this time, I would not trade a single step of the journey, not for anything. Thank you for being here. Thank you for walking beside me, even from far away. Your time, your heart, your listening. They meant more than I can ever say. Wherever life is taking you, I hope you remember that even broken beginnings can still lead to beautiful endings. I am grateful you stayed until the very last page.